everyone, and welcome to the Haynes Report. I'm Carol Haynes. In this episode, we're discussing why companies such as Anheuser-Busch, Target, Kate Spade, and Nike are putting their companies at risk to promote a radical left ideology. We'll discuss who is behind this, and then we're going to talk about how we can stop it. Have you been wondering why companies are willing to lose billions of dollars in market share and product sales while defending their position? It's really because they have no choice. They're backed into a corner by a racketeering cartel. If they don't support the woke agenda, big corporations will get a low ESG social credit score that can make or break their businesses. Executives at companies like Nike, Anheuser-Busch, Kate Spade, and Ultra Beauty aren't just virtue signaling. They're handing out lucrative brand endorsement deals to people once considered fringe celebrities, such as the trans influencer Dylan Mulvaney, because they have to, or they risk getting a low social credit score that will make or break their businesses. So what is this ESG? This actually is an acronym for Environmental Social Governance. ESG is the vehicle by which big government and big business are coming together to control our U.S. economy. Under this arrangement, free enterprise is out and woke corporatism is in. ESG is a mafia-style extortion racket that has a chokehold on corporations to drive through their woke agenda. ESG promotes LGBTQ, which is now the queer Marxist front group, queer activists. ESG is the key component of the Great Reset movement for the New World Order. The World Economic Forum and several other globalist institutions are targeting capitalism and its priorities through ESG and social credit scores. Publicly traded investment company managers such as BlackRock and Vanguard use these non-financial ESG scores to force corporations to change their policies, their products, and their business practices. The Corporate Equality Index, CEI, is a social scoring overseen by the Human Rights Campaign, which is the largest LGBTQ+ political lobbying group in the entire world. This Human Rights Campaign, better known as HRC, has received millions of dollars from George Soros' Open Society Foundation, along with money from others. HRC actually issues report cards for America's biggest corporations, using the CEI to award them points or to subtract points for how well the company is towing the line on the woke agenda. The S in ESG stands for social justice, and is used as a scoring mechanism. The CEI rates corporations' workplace on equality and inclusion of LGBTQ+ employees. In the 2022 CEI, 842 employers achieved a top score of 100, and they earned the coveted title of Best Place to Work for LGBTQ+ Equality. Of the Fortune 500 companies, 379 of them actively participated in the 2022 CEI. The top executives at these companies get huge bonuses for meeting the ESG goal. Remember that we talked about they get a lot of money from George Soros and other foundations that are promoting this woke agenda. I'm sure this has something to do with it. I don't know where all the money for the bonuses is coming from. That's another topic, but we do know that they're getting lots of extra money for promoting this. These businesses also have to require their vendors and their suppliers and recipients of their philanthropic funds to support ESG goals. ESG invests in companies that are anti-fossil fuels, that promote unionization and stress racial and gender equity over personal merit and hiring new employees. Company focus is not on the best candidate for the job, but who will be the most effective in helping the company reach its ESG quota in order to get a good score when that end of the year report is filed. These big fund managers pressure these top executive management teams and boards, and in many cases they determine the salary and the bonuses of executives, and also who gets reelected or reappointed to the corporate boards. So we can understand why some of these CEOs are really much more concerned about pleasing BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street Bank, who are among the top shareholders in most of these big companies that are publicly traded. So the CEOs are more concerned about pleasing these fund than their customers. Let that sink in. They don't really care about, you're the one who's spending money there. They don't care about pleasing you, which is another good reason to boycott them permanently. The recent fallout from Anheuser-Busch and Target is giving us a glimpse of the behind-the-curtain racketeering that's trapping our corporations. Dylan Mulvaney, a transgender male who has 10 million followers on TikTok, was hired by Bud Light to promote its beer to show publicly, to virtue signal, that the corporation is supporting this ESG agenda. So when the public boycotted Bud Light and the stock price cratered, many probably expected the company to apologize. That is not going to happen. Many people have said they won't come back as customers unless the company apologizes, even if then. But the company can't and won't apologize because it's boxed into a corner. Remember that corporate bonuses and jobs are dependent on a high ESG score. Even their credit lines for bank loans will be affected if their social credit score drops. On the other hand, because the CEO didn't publicly defend Mulvaney, backing away from him instead, HRC berated the company, and then they lowered the Anheuser-Busch social credit score. Still, the company cannot apologize because HRC will then target their ability to get corporate loans and their company's reputation. They'll be downplaying the intimidating the CEOs and the other top executives, and so they'll come up with something that is wrong totally across the board, so that the company is just maligned, is discredited. The company may already be destroyed. I'm talking about Anheuser-Busch, because it would rather upset its customers than HRC. And if you read what the CEO came out and said, then you know the same was with Disney and Target. They're not apologizing. You know what they do? They just double down. So let's look at how ESG is hurting Americans. Using ESG social credit scores, the Biden administration and woke financial corporations are pushing the radical climate agenda. They're cutting off access to money for the fossil fuel industry in order to bankrupt it. Now that's another whole podcast, but that's for another day. We just know that they want to bankrupt the fossil fuel industry. Insurance companies are cutting off insurance coverage for the industry. Ford Motor has bought into the electric vehicle racket, so they had to restructure their factories and they laid off 3,000 workers. Here's an example. If you apply for a government contract, maybe the contract by law is written so that only companies with a good ESG score will be considered. If you want a small business loan, maybe the bank is only going to do business with people who have a good ESG score. Here's another example. A national news headline stated this: bank announces it will ban loans for petrol or diesel cars in order to fight climate change and encourage electric vehicles. Still another example from a news headline. Pfizer Fellowship flagrantly violates the law, lawyers say. The Breakthrough Fellowship prohibits whites and Asians from applying. This is a restriction that is flagrantly illegal. Still a fourth example. If your city government pension fund puts your 401k money into a mutual fund that invests according to ESG goals, it will buy shares of companies that are basically trying to hurt the industries that we, the grassroots, are trying to support and that we need, such as fossil fuel products. In Oklahoma, 6% of the jobs up there are in some fashion tied to oil and gas. That means a lot of people will be laid off if they work in oil and gas. Another example, a public pension is a taxpayer-funded retirement system for people who used to work for a government agency, such as the Postal Service or Fire Department. Some public pension managers use taxpayer-funded public pensions to advance ESG goals. A high ESG score or rating has absolutely nothing to do with whether the fund will earn a good return for the little guy, because companies will focus on a social credit score and virtual signaling instead of delivering good products for customers and watching the bottom line for their shareholders. We're being told that ESG investment funds achieve higher returns, but there's absolutely no evidence that they outperform non-ESG investment funds. In fact, ESG funds have violated more labor and environmental laws than non-ESG firms. Still another example, some investment management services and banks have started to apply ESG scores to individual banking and investment accounts. Now, they've been doing it for corporate. Now, they're starting to do it on the individual customer. So watch, your bank may be trying to do that to you, and will just mark you out so that you won't be able to get an investment account. You won't even be able to set up an individual banking. And our last example is that banks will use ESG scores when evaluating individuals and businesses applying for financial services like loans. Now here we're talking about smaller people. I'm talking about not smaller people, but individuals, people who are not concerned and they're big CEOs with the big companies. We have maybe small businesses who are trying to get loans. So the banks are going to be targeting these small businesses. And I'm going to that in just a few minutes about why they're doing it with small businesses. All of us have been and are being hurt by ESG, whether you're shopping, you're working, you're saving for retirement, or you're just trying to start your own small business. ESG hurts you. But as compliance with these issues become forced, there will be more and more red tape that's going to increase the cost of doing business. And those business costs are going to get passed on to you, the customer. Let's see how ESG is hurting nations abroad. The European Union is considering legislation to make ESG scores mandatory for many companies that operate in Europe or they do business with European companies, including American businesses. European countries have been focusing on ESG and now they're paying a very high price. Sri Lanka is devastated and Dutch farmers are protesting the emissions cuts in the Netherlands. Germany promotes green energy and now is in an energy crunch with some of its cities cutting off hot water and shutting off the lights. People are terrified that there's going to be an energy crisis in the winter. We in America cannot allow this to happen to us. ESG scores are like Communist China's social credit scores, and many of you have heard about those, and you know that it simply just imprisons the people there. If you don't have a good score in China, you can't take your money out of the bank. They just put a lock on your money. You can't go buy a plane ticket or a train ticket to travel to another Chinese province, and you likely won't get into college. Buying a home or getting into an apartment, I'm not sure how many homes you can buy there, but just getting a decent apartment I know is a problem there. You can't also get a job if you don't have a good score. Your ESG score determines whether you're socially acceptable. If you're not, then others won't associate with you because the government will crack down on them too. Who is behind this? Probably who you would expect. It goes all the way up to the United Nations and the World Economic Forum on the international, the global level, and to all of these globalist leaders and others such as Soros, Gates, Zuckerberg, and King Charles, the British monarch. And this would be with any British monarch in there. As I discussed at the beginning of this show, ESG is part of the Great Reset to force people into a new world order by just cowing and getting them to cave to it where they won't fight back. These globalists are pressuring our progressive lawmakers who oversee government pension funds that are invested in corporations by investment firms such as BlackRock. BlackRock is told to demand that corporations promote this UN, World Economic Forum, radical agenda if they want their stock purchased for pension funds. Compliance by companies is enforced through social credit scores. So you see, you go all the way to the top in the global chain, then there's money that's being filtered out, and then I wonder of these lawmakers, how many of those are getting money then to, I'm talking about the ones who oversee the government pension funds, how many of them then are being funded to make sure that BlackRock and these others are telling these big corporations, you've got to get this social credit score. You've got to promote our radical woke agenda. The focus has been on large corporations, but the World Economic Forum now is targeting small and medium-sized enterprises. This is what I was referring to a minute ago when I was talking about individuals and small businesses going into banks and trying to get loans or trying to even open bank accounts. These people, these small businesses and these medium-sized enterprises comprise a huge, huge market share in the world. And here's what the World Economic Forum website says about them. Let me quote it to you. They make up 90%, they being the small business and the medium-sized business, they make up 90% of businesses globally. They create 2 out of every 3 jobs worldwide. They support the livelihoods of over 2 billion people. And remember that there are about 8 billion, so this means 25% of the world's population. Going on with the quote, and they are indispensable to the smooth functioning of global chain supplies. Despite their enormous impact, many are not yet fully engaged on environmental, social, and governance ESG issues. It's easy to understand why. Change is coming, though, for these small and medium-sized businesses, whether they like it or not. And this is what World Economic Forum says. Their website says, again, change is coming for SMEs, whether they like it or not. That means they're going to be forced to do just what the big corporations are doing. ESG reporting standards and regulations are evolving fast. We only have a few years left to alter the trajectory of our GHG emissions, reduce global inequalities, and achieve the substance of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And that ends the quote. Now here's something that you may remember, the 2021 Agenda. Well, they didn't quite get that deadline, so it's moved to 2030. And is now called the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and that's the UN's agenda for a communist-led New World Order. Anytime you hear sustainable development, just know that's New World Order. Know that that is UN, and I don't care where you hear it, and you hear it everywhere now. You hear it, people using it just on a day-to-day basis, that it's sustainable. Please, let's stop using that word sustainable. And we see it in our city governments also, and our state levels. So they're trying to force us to get used to using these words so that they become commonplace, so they become just part of our thinking. So they're supposed to be every day. That agenda, this 2030 agenda, includes support of LGBTQ people, sexual orientation, and gender identity. The goal is to destroy the foundation of civilization, which is the nuclear family. Single-parent families are far more likely to experience poverty and to be more dependent on the government. In America, the nuclear family and our culture are being and have been destroyed to a great extent. We were once a proud, fiercely independent people. We are now a cowering people. We're fearful. We're dependent on government entitlements to a great degree. Our families are broken. A black family, instead of 80% of a black family having a mother and a father, they now have 80% or single parent families. Now, this is making us easy prey for a takedown and control under New World Order. When the pride flag flew center place at the White House with the American flag off to the side, that was public notice telling the public out there a new regime is taking over America. So what can we do to stop ESG? A lot. Here are 4. Number 1, a state can refuse to allow their pension funds to be invested in companies that support ESG. They can just simply say they won't fund an agenda that actively destroys the people's livelihoods and which also will destroy a state's economy. Governor DeSantis in Florida did this. He pulled $2 billion worth of Florida state assets managed by BlackRock. He just said, we're not going to let you manage them anymore if you're going to put them with ESG. Number 2, Americans can have a major impact on companies that promote ESG by boycotting them. So here you see money talks. We know it's already been talking with Target. We know it's been talking with Disney, with Anheuser-Busch. Number 3, we as the grassroots, we the people, can stand up, call them out. we can protest en masse. We can come together in large numbers and talk with friends and family, educate them. And here's another: people who are moving in here from blue states, they talk blue state talk, but they don't realize, they think they're more conservative, but their ideas have been so ingrained in their thinking that they're bringing those ideas here. So we have to re-educate them, and then encourage your friends and family to go out and to educate others. And the last one is state legislatures can pass laws. Now this one can be problematic. I see a lot of bans being passed. They passed bans against Common Core. They've had bans on critical race theory. They've got bans on DEI. But most of the time the states just don't enforce it. They just have something on the books, and it makes the public stays off the back of the legislator, because he says, well, I voted for that and we've got it on the books. Well, then why is it working? Because they don't enforce it. That's why it doesn't work. Just this year, Tennessee, Kentucky, Oklahoma, and West Virginia all passed great bills. West Virginia basically said oil, gas, coal are important industries in our state. So they said they are not going to do any of their banking with big financial firms that are pushing ESG, because it's going to hurt West Virginia. They're taking their financial contracts elsewhere. Well, in conclusion, the left wants to implement ESG under the radar, and they want to get it all in place, and then there we are. It's a takeover, and we're under New World Order. But the public, the Americans, are getting wise. We're pushing back. We're going to have to do a lot more of it. Let's give them pushback that they don't want. Let's be their very worst nightmare, and we can stop this thing. Well, folks, that's it for today. Thank you for taking your time to join me at the Haynes Report. Please check out my commentaries and other podcasts at my website, www.drcarolhaynes.com. Until next time,